Disney and the Downfall of John Lasseter. The D-Files Part 1 by Alan Ing from filmthreat.com, December 20th, 2023. How did we get here? As a Disney fan for over 50 years, I was a die-hard fanboy of the company, to the point that Film Threat readers referred to me as a Disney shill. I used to spend thousands of dollars each year throughout the parks, buying merch and watching every film the Walt Disney Company produced. But something changed, and the so-called Disney magic began to fade. Today, thousands of dollars have turned into a scant tens of dollars. I haven't visited a park since the dark times, and my excitement for anything Disney has turned to disdain. So, again, what happened? Our story begins with a single event not so long ago that fundamentally changed the company, culturally and creatively. Mind you, this single event is not the reason for the fall of Disney. As we'll show, those seeds had been planted long ago during the Eisner era. This event served as the catalyst for the inevitable creative and financial collapse of the company that Walt Disney started 100 years ago. As Elon Musk surmised, Walt Disney is spinning in his grave like a drill bit. That single event was the removal of Disney's chief creative officer, John Lasseter. This story of Lasseter's demise will be told from the perspective of the rank-and-file employees at Disney and Pixar, revealing what they observed and how they felt when it happened. Any Disney fan knows the impact of Lasseter's creative influence on the company. Along with founder Steve Jobs, Lasseter's groundbreaking work at Pixar gave birth to the computer-generated animated feature industry as we know it today. After the release of Toy Story, he was thrust into the public eye as the bright future of Disney. Through his guidance at Pixar, innovations in animation quickly eclipsed the legacy set by the initial Disney savior and CEO, Michael Eisner. Dare I say, John Lasseter was poised to become the next Walt Disney as the creative demigod and public face of the company. Eventually, in 2004, news of Pixar's impending divorce from the Walt Disney Company made headlines and panicked Disney fans. Eisner's magic touch on the company was waning, and Walt's nephew Roy would engage in a hostile attempt to reclaim the company, resulting in installing Bob Iger as the new CEO. In 2006, one of Iger's first steps was the $7.4 billion purchase of Pixar, making John Lasseter Disney's chief creative officer. The merger put Lasseter in charge of overseeing multiple aspects of the company, primarily Pixar and Disney Animation. Who is John Lasseter, the man? Our sources described him as two different people. In speaking to current and former Disney Pixar animation employees, support staff, and outside independent contractors, the consensus was that Lasseter was a joy to work with. Disney fans saw him as a father figure. He worked hard to create an environment where everyone felt like family and looked forward to coming to work each day. Other sources, who hoped to one day become artists and animators, once believed that working at Pixar was the ultimate dream, and for many were excited to one day work for John Lasseter. But, like a father, John Lasseter was a perfectionist. His insistence on absolute perfection was notorious for everyone who worked for him, meaning everyone. I was told numerous stories of his almost stone-cold criticisms of their creative choices. When presenting one's ideas to Lasseter, all emotion would drain from his body, and he would matter-of-factly tell you why your idea sucked and then tell you how to make it better. Many who understood John Lasseter saw this as a stinging learning opportunity, yet this tough love was applied equally to all. Not everyone saw it that way. One source recounted observing a prominent figure at Pixar who had their idea derided by Lasseter and took it as a personal attack on not just their ideas but also on them. It was apparent that to this observer, this fatherly persona of the warm and loving Lasseter was instantly dashed. What many considered Lasseter's most significant attributes soon turned into a weapon against him. From a management standpoint, his insistence on perfection meant that most creative decisions about a project had to be run by him. This single point of approval created a bottleneck in Disney Animation and Pixar. Projects were delayed because people were waiting for Lasseter's approval. This problem reached a boiling point among Disney executives with the failure of The Good Dinosaur. Maybe John is biting off more than he can chew. Then there's the corporate ego. Maybe some within the company considered Lasseter could become a threat to his superiors, like Bob Iger. From a fan's perspective, John Lasseter seemed to be the heir apparent to Walt Disney himself. He had an upbeat and positive demeanor on television. His collection of Hawaiian shirts garnered "Oh, Dad" from fans. What would happen if Lasseter did ultimately step in the literal shoes of Walt Disney? Is it possible that Disney executives saw this as a threat? Just speculating, but was Lasseter due to be taken down a peg or two, or maybe entirely off the board? One perceived problem Lasseter had was his penchant for hugging. Hugging and other forms of familial affection seem harmless, right? Many sources saw this as a positive trait, but knew it was potentially problematic. They noted that many employees and cast members looked forward to a Lasseter hug and viewed it as platonic affection, while others didn't, and rightfully so. Let's be clear, not wanting a hug is perfectly acceptable, and personal boundaries must be respected, especially in an office environment, no matter if they are perceived as harmless. Some felt that he might take offense, whether warranted or not, and their hug refusal could affect their professional growth in the company. Important, our sources felt that this issue of personal boundaries was a significant problem and should have been addressed years ago. It was also no secret that Lasseter liked to drink, particularly at office functions and celebrations. No one said that he had a drinking problem, but alcohol did present problems for Lasseter in public settings. Film threat publisher Chris Gore recounts working with Lasseter at the Sonoma International Film Festival. The parties were lavish, the wine flowed freely, and Lasseter loved wine. Several sources confirmed that alcohol was becoming a problem to the point that Disney corporate was forced to have handlers on standby to watch over Lasseter to avoid the mere appearance of impropriety. In October 2017, the New York Times and the New Yorker broke the news of decades of alleged sexual misconduct by prolific movie producer and mogul Harvey Weinstein. The revelation and eventual conviction of Weinstein's crimes led to a global wave of similar allegations against prominent figures in Hollywood, known as the Weinstein effect. While the Me Too movement rightfully exposed many sexual predators in Hollywood, several people believe the movement was used as a political and corporate weapon against specific figures. Some questioned whether targets were actual predators or political or corporate scapegoats, and how it was easier to prosecute them in public rather than in a courtroom. Like lightning in a bottle, Lasseter fell victim to the Weinstein effect. Reports of his inappropriate behavior made their way to the public and the board. According to the Hollywood Reporter's Kim Masters, a longtime Pixar employee said that Lasseter was known for grabbing, kissing, and making comments about physical attributes. As these accusations circulated at Disney, our sources questioned how these stories were framed as malicious and possibly unfair accusations against Lasseter. Like a wildfire, these rumors and innuendo spread quickly, causing many to question and consider their most recent interactions with Lasseter. For example, Masters reports that he made an unwanted advance toward Toy Story 4's writer Rashida Jones, though Masters immediately quotes Jones as refuting the claim. Quote, "We did not leave Pixar because of unwanted advances. That is untrue." End quote. The damage was done. Now, false rumors are being planted in the minds of his detractors. It didn't stop there. Anonymous reports of Lasseter's behavior continued to run in the mainstream press. According to Variety, Lasseter's exploits bloomed, stating he had a reputation for touching women inappropriately, including rubbing their legs and kissing them on the lips. Lasseter was also reprimanded for making out with a subordinate at an Oscar party in 2010. Confusion and potential ulterior motives swirled amongst many of Lasseter's loyalists. Was a friendly hug from Lasseter merely a hug? Was a kiss on the cheek or the lips more than a kiss on the cheek or the lips? Were compliments about one's appearance more than compliments? With the fires of the Me Too movement raging, many within the rank and file knew Lasseter's days were numbered, and his supporters were helpless, or more afraid to defend him. We're told that anyone willing to defend Lasseter, or even ask a question, was silenced out of fear. In November 2017, it was announced that John Lasseter would take a leave of absence from Pixar and the Walt Disney Company. Sources felt that this allowed Lasseter's detractors to bring allegations against him without real opportunities to defend himself. Though we have no details regarding what happened to John during this time, other high-profile Disney firings included lengthy struggle sessions and high-pressure sensitivity training that I will highlight in future reports. If his case were resolved like other harassment firings at the time, Lasseter would most likely be forced to sign an ironclad non-disclosure agreement, preventing him from ever defending himself in public. It became apparent within the walls of Disney that anyone supporting Lasseter must immediately go into protection mode by keeping their questions and opinions to themselves. The office culture at the House of Mouse changed drastically overnight. Sources observed that the mood was grim, going from bad to worse. The warm family environment would never return. Regarding Lasseter's innocence or guilt, our sources did not outright believe or not believe the accusation against Lasseter, but they had questions that they knew would never be answered. Alternatively, many felt that an activist faction within the company was growing and conspiring to remove Lasseter, and his inappropriate behavior was the perfect weapon to use against him. Now it was a matter of how to frame these stories for maximum effect. So now it appeared the pieces were in place, with certain executives wanting to oust Lasseter, and a growing faction within the rank and file pressing forward with a stack of allegations against him that to this day goes unprosecuted and unproven. With pressure from the top and bottom, in June 2018, Lasseter announced that he would leave the company at the end of the year. One source told us that during an all-hands meeting, once the announcement was made, a female employee raised her hand and asked, "Can we have a woman run this place now?" The source mentioned that Disney had plenty of qualified women in positions of authority, yet it was repugnant how they planned to replace a single man, John Lasseter, who arguably made billions for the company, with someone solely on the qualification that that person was female, rather than find someone, female or male, who had the passion, experience, and talent to take the company where it needed to go creatively. Common sense would tell you that your experience matters more in business than your appearance. Sadly, Lasseter's firing wasn't exactly a surprise. Many also knew that it didn't take a rocket scientist to know that once major players in Hollywood started going down, these forces would inevitably go after Lasseter. Yet it's worthy of note that despite his shortcomings and behavior, whether seen as affectionate or inappropriate, John Lasseter was generally loved and respected by most people he encountered professionally, and that Lasseter's behavior could have been corrected long ago. They questioned why Lasseter's behavior was never addressed years before Me Too. His behavior could have been corrected long before Me Too and been an example to all management and staff regarding appropriate behavior in the workplace. The message was clear. John Lasseter left the Walt Disney Company an utter and total disgrace. Disney legend, forget it. In fact, moves have been made within the halls of Disney to remove his legacy as if he never existed. Anything that reminded the rank and file of Lasseter was removed from plain sight. Are Hawaiian shirts even allowed to be worn on campus anymore? Or heaven forbid you should utter the phrase, "When John was here." Publicly, it's not much better. I recently mentioned John's name to a Disney fanatic friend, and their instant retort was, "He's a bad man." The worst part of the entire experience was the leadership vacuum created by John's absence. Our sources describe life at Disney afterwards as hostile, to say the least, and that this hostility spread to all of Disney's business units and brands. Cast members felt like they were constantly walking on eggshells. The mere act of casting doubt or asking questions about the allegations was met with hostility. You became a marked person, subjected to mind-numbing HR meetings and forced sensitivity training. It gets worse. Arguably, Lasseter's departure also marked the start of the steady creative decline of the Walt Disney Company. The last film he directly influenced was Pixar's Coco in 2017. Many of us fans believe that Coco is Pixar's crowning achievement in its prolific catalog. By the company's own admission, the creative cracks started to appear in its next feature, Cars 3, as they began applying gender-based statistical analytics to story development. For example, counting lines of dialogue. More on this to come. Though he was never officially charged with formal harassment claims or indictment, and we have very little evidence, one way or the other, our sources point to the talent who eventually defected from Disney and followed Lasseter to Skydance Animation as an indicator of the veracity of allegations laid against him. In the following weeks, a series of stories on Film Threat will detail the current state of working at Disney. Through the eyes of current and former Disney employees, I'll show how the seeds of the current corporate culture were planted long ago, and how this hostile and very political environment has driven out Disney's creative, talented, and veterans, resulting in the steady decline of quality across the entire brand. As other outlets cover the current corporate and legal battles at Disney today, I will show the events that led up to the impending financial implosion of the Walt Disney Company. Thank you for listening.